Today I'm going to share some different tips and hacks with you that will make chicken keeping a lot easier for new owners. For starters, you may notice that some of these chickens look a little bit rough. Right now it's fall as I'm filming this, and a lot of them are starting to lose their feathers because they're going through something called molting. Molting is a natural process in which the chickens will lose their feathers to regrow new ones. It can take 2 to 3 months to fully regrow their new feathers. Feathers are made up of about 90% protein, so it takes a lot of work to grow each one back. Once you rule out that your chickens do not have mites, then it can be safe to say that they are molting. Now, I do have a couple videos on my channel that go into more detail about molting, so if you want to learn how to help your chickens go through that easier and faster, then check those out. But for the sake of this video, since it does include some tips and hacks and tricks to make chicken keeping easier, I'll go over some things briefly. When your chickens are molting, you can feed them something called Feather Fixer. It's a line of feed by Nutrina that was specifically designed to help your chickens with molting. It's a high protein feed that's 20% protein, and it was designed to support them if they are still laying eggs. Now, chickens naturally will stop laying as many eggs when they're molting because, like I said, it takes a lot of work to grow back those feathers. But also, since most chickens molt in the fall, they're not going to lay as many eggs because the daylight hours are getting shorter and shorter. So that signals to their body that it's time to take a break. Some people trick their hens into thinking it's spring by using artificial heating and lighting, and that may help them lay more eggs, but I give mine that natural break because I feel that that's what their bodies are intended to do, and I think that it can make them live longer, healthier, and happier lives. I have some chickens that are almost 6 years old, and they are healthy, they're hardy, and they still lay eggs. And I really think it's because I let them take that natural winter break. And with that being said, most won't take a full break for the whole winter. They will still lay the occasional egg here and there, but it won't be anything compared to the production that they have in the spring and summer. Other tips that can help with molting include adding some treats or supplements to their diet, such as black oil sunflower seeds. Those are very rich in protein, but they're also high in fat, so just like with any treat, please feed it in moderation. The natural oils in the black oil sunflower seed is very good for your hen's skin and feathers, so it'll help them grow back nice and shiny. And as another occasional treat, you can also give them mealworms or black soldier fly larvae. They're both very rich in protein. The black soldier fly larva also has a pretty decent calcium ratio, so that's good for hens that are laying eggs. Another treat you can give them is something called a flock block. It's made up of multiple different seeds and grains, and it's a nice, hard, sturdy block, so it should last for days, keep your flock entertained. And this is especially good if you're introducing new chickens to your flock and you want your hens to be distracted. Instead of picking on the new hens, they can instead peck on this treat and stay occupied with that. But as a word of caution, if you are adding new birds to the flock after their quarantine period, of course, please do so gradually to make sure that no one gets hurt or fights while they're establishing their new pecking order. I have a few different videos on my channel of how I introduced my new chicks to the flock, so if you want more tips on how to introduce new birds, please be sure to check that out. And while we're on the subject of introducing new birds to your flock, you can also add in other enrichment things besides flock blocks or other treats just to keep them occupied so they're less likely to pick on the new birds. I have a few different videos on my channel of different enrichment items that have worked well for my birds. And many of these you can find in your feed store, or if you cannot find it, they should be available on Amazon. Here's some different pictures below of some stuff that has worked well with my flock. Now, moving forward with more tips. Some general tips if you're a new chicken owner. Adding these things can help make your life easier. Birds are animals that swallow their food whole, and obviously they eat a lot of things that have hard shells on it, such as dried corn or seeds. So they're going to need help digesting that since they don't chew it. So you can add grit to their diet. Grit is a small stone, and the birds will swallow that whole, and the stone will go into their gizzard, grind up the feed, and make it a lot easier for them to digest their food. You can find grit at most feed stores. If you have laying hens, you can also get them an oyster shell supplement. You can put this out free choice for them, and as their body feels that it needs more calcium, they will naturally crave it, and they can then go access the oyster shell and eat it to help replace the calcium that's being depleted from their body as they lay eggs. You can also find oyster shell at most feed stores, but if you want to save money, you can also crush up and dry their eggshells once you're done cooking with the eggs and feed the eggshells back to them. One of the reasons you really want to make sure you crush it up is because if it still looks like an eggshell and they can recognize what it is, that may teach them to become egg eaters, and you do not want that because that's a really hard habit to break. If they do start eating their own eggs, Some tips for that are you could put some spices or some mustard inside of an eggshell, so when they go to peck at that, they'll get an unpleasant taste and it should hopefully break them of the habit. You could also put fake eggs in there, so when they go to peck it, it'll be hard and it won't give them the satisfaction of breaking, because there will be nothing to eat in a fake hard egg. When it comes to the grit and the oyster shell, some people just toss it on the ground for their birds to find. Some people mix it in their feed. I personally like to put it in a bird feeder, and I put it on a small shepherd's hook so that way it hangs just low enough for your birds to reach. Obviously, you don't want a tall shepherd's hook. That would just defeat the whole point. But I put it in here so that way as my birds feel that they need it, they'll be able to find it in a clean and safe, dry place, and I won't risk it getting dirty or going to waste or washing away in the rain. It also makes the coop look nice. Now moving on to some odor control tips. At most feed stores, you can find something called PDZ Coop Refresher. This is an all-natural odor neutralizer, and this helps block out the harmful ammonia and odor caused by their manure. Feel free to pause this video if you need to read some of the labels that I'm showing. Another option is something called Coop and Compost. I've used this one a lot and I've been really happy with it. The Coop and Compost reduces odor as well as moisture, and here's the instructions on the back. So this is just a really good one that you can sprinkle out in their run or mix into their coop with their bedding. Another thing that I found really helpful when it comes to odor control is their feed, and this may be a little bit surprising to you, but Nutrena has a line of feed called NatureWise. I talk about the NatureWise line in many of my videos on my channel. And what's different about this one is that the NatureWise line adds yucca root into the feed, and that is a natural way to control their odor. I was very skeptical of it at first, but I was pleasantly surprised once I tried it myself and I saw that it actually does help the smell somewhat. Now, manure is always going to have an odor, I'm not going to lie. It's not going to go away completely, but it really did help. And in return, it really lessened the amount of flies that I had in the summertime, which was awesome. There's a bunch of different options for the NatureWise line. Like I talked about earlier, the Feather Fixer is in the NatureWise line, so that has the yucca root in it. They also have pellets, they have crumbles, they have something called Hardy Hen, which I have a full video on. That is a soy-free, omega-3 rich feed infused with flax. And if your hens are eating an omega-3 rich diet, their eggs will be rich in omega-3s, which means they'll be healthier for you to eat. So that's a win for everyone. So I really like the Hardy Hen. Another tip that you may find useful is providing your chickens with a dust bath. Chickens are naturally going to want to take dust baths. Even if you don't provide them with a station to do so, they're going to be digging holes on their own and rolling around in the dirt. But I find that providing them with an area to do it makes them not dig up your yard as much, and it just makes life easier for them as well. And you can also have more control over it if you're setting it up yourself, which can help control and fight back on mites. Prevention is key, so if you can try to prevent mites from the start, it's a lot better than trying to get rid of them after you get them. What I do is I just get a big rubber pan from the feed store. You can fill it with dry soil and all-purpose sand, as well as wood ash. You can also use diatomaceous earth, as well as GuardStar, garden, and poultry dust. And anytime you are adding something, please make sure you read the directions on the label and use them accordingly. If you have any questions, call the number on the label. Now, diatomaceous earth is a very touchy subject. Some people love it, some people hate it. A lot of people are afraid of it. If it makes you uncomfortable, I'll go ahead and say it now. Don't bother using it. Don't do something that makes you uncomfortable. But I also believe that education is key. So do your own research and see what you think after that. Diatomaceous earth is all natural. It's not a chemical. If you get the food grade one, it's perfectly safe. But the reason why a lot of people are apprehensive about it is because it's very dry and powdery, which means if you accidentally breathe it in, that could be harmful for your lungs. So if you're going to be using this in your coop, be cautious. Don't put it out on a windy day. And if you're going to be doing anything that could potentially stir it up, just be smart and, use a respirator. Chickens don't live as long as people do, so long-term effects from the dust probably won't catch up with them like it would for a person. And plus, like I said earlier, chickens are naturally dusty animals. They crave dry, dusty areas. They're gonna find it and create one whether you provide it for them or not. Think about it. Them breathing in the dry soil or the wood ash is very similar to breathing in the dry, dusty powder of the diatomaceous earth. Bathing in dry, dusty stuff is how they keep themselves clean and keep mites and other parasites off of their body. Diatomaceous earth works to kill insects by drying out and slicing up the insects, which will mean if there's anything trying to host off of your bird, it should knock them out naturally without having to use chemicals. But like I said, if it still makes you nervous handling something that powdery and dry, you don't have to do it. Just do your own research and do what you're comfortable with. But I also do like to point out to people, you often can't avoid it entirely when dealing with poultry because almost all feed has diatomaceous earth in it. It prevents crumbles and mash and pellets from sticking together and clumping. It can also help keep things dry and prevent mold a little bit longer. And it also can help keep grain mites and weevils out of the feed. So most feed does have this in it already. So of course it's going to be small amounts, but it's just something to keep in mind when you're opening up a bag and dumping it into your feed bin. Moving on from the dust baths, some helpful things to keep on hand are vitamins. You should always have these on hand at all time, as well as some first aid supplies, and I have a whole video on that, and I will put a link to that in the description below. But I always like to keep vitamins on hand so that way if you're about to do some traveling, especially if you have like chickens or kids in 4-H that have a project with them, or if you're about to have extreme weather changes, it's good to add vitamins to the water just to give them a little immunity boost. But also, you never know when an illness or an injury is going to strike. And it's good to keep things on hand so that you're prepared. I'm a huge fan of Nutri-Drench. This one has helped some of my sick birds in the past, help them get strong and bounce back really, really quick. And Poultry Cell is another good one. If you can't find Nutri-Drench, definitely check out some Poultry Cell. If you can't find either at your feed store, you should be able to find them online. Use them according to the directions on the label, but you can give it to them directly, or what I do is I just mix it into their water. And it's really good for boosting their immune system and giving them some much needed energy during times of stress. Birds are prey animals, so it's natural for them to want to hide any injuries or illnesses, so by the time you notice that your birds are feeling a little bit off, it could mean that something is more serious than you even know. So make sure you're prepared just in case anything pops up, so that way you can act quickly and have something to help hold them over until you're able to diagnose what's going on or find a vet that can help them. One thing I found really helpful is using nesting pads, and I will put a link to the ones I particularly like in the description below. I used to use straw in the nesting boxes and my chickens would just kick it out, but I switched to these biodegradable nesting pads. Here's the brand that the feed store had, so for the sake of the video I'm showing you that, but I have used this one before I'm showing and they do work decently. And you can even find reusable washable nesting pads, so that will help save you money, but it will take more time because you'll have to wash them out frequently. But I really like these. Like I said, they are biodegradable, so you can compost them and use them in your garden. And they help provide just a soft landing place for the eggs, so you're less likely to have breakage, and they will also help keep the egg clean and make your hens comfortable. So I love using the nesting pads. Another useful thing that I have done and shown in other videos is when it gets really muddy in your pen, because as you can see, even if you have beautiful grass, your chickens will eat it. And then when it rains, of course, there's going to be mud. Well, that's not nice to look at, and plus you want your birds to have something dry to walk on. So you can get plain, undyed mulch and line that in your coop, and it'll help dry things up, it'll help with odor, and it'll make things look a lot cleaner and more comfortable for your birds. That way they're not constantly on the wet mud, which would not be good for their feet. You can also use all-purpose sand in their run, and what I actually do is I use all-purpose sand in the coop as their bedding, and it's really, really easy to clean up. Similar to scooping out a litter box, you just scoop and sift the poop out of the sand, and then you'll have fresh, long-lasting bedding for them. If you have chickens, another thing you're going to want to be prepared for is predator prevention, because there's so many animals out there that want to eat your birds and that will eat your birds if they have the opportunity. This here is Brutus. I have a whole predator prevention video on my channel where I first introduced Brutus. You can get this real cheap on Amazon. It's just an inflatable man. I put some clothes on him so he looked more realistic, and this helps keep the hawks away. You can also see that I have my birds fenced in, and I also have netting over the entire enclosure to keep predators out. Eventually, I would like to switch it to wire so that it's even more protected. You can also get bird tape and put that along the top of the fence line to deter hawks from wanting to land over here and other birds of prey, and just to deter birds in general, because birds carry diseases. You don't want your chickens to catch that, so the reflective tape will make it look unappealing for birds flying over to want to land on this area. Another useful tip is that you should keep your feed and your treats in some kind of container. I use galvanized trash cans with lids so that way bugs and rodents can't get into them and make them nasty. As you can see, I just bought this bag of feather fixer here, and I'm getting ready to dump it into this trash can to keep it nice and safe. You don't want to attract rodents. They will be so hard to get rid of if they start showing up here. So from the start, just try to keep your area nice and clean, keep all feed and treats contained, and at night, any uneaten food, please remove so that the rodents don't come and sniff it out. I also like to provide my hens with scratch grains. Now, any treat should only be given in moderation. It shouldn't make up more than 10% of their diet. But scratch is a good way to add variety to their diet because chickens are omnivores. They're going to be on the lookout all day long for different things to eat. And it's also a really great way to tame your chickens and teach them to come to you, especially if you're someone that wants to free range them. If you give this to them at certain times of the day, they will learn to look forward to it then. And if you feed it to them from your hands, it'll teach them to come to you and to be more friendly and tame with you because they'll associate you with something positive. I make my own. This is basically just a different mix of grains and seeds, and then in the cold months I do like to add corn in here because it's rich in carbohydrates, so it will help provide your hens with energy so they can keep themselves warm on cold nights. I also like to add more black oil sunflower seeds to their scratch grain mix during the cold months for reasons I discussed earlier when we were touching on malting. But like I said, keep it in moderation because you don't want your birds to become overweight because that is not healthy for them either. A lot of stores have sunflower seeds, but most feed stores have them too, so while you're there getting your other chicken supplies, you can pick up some sunflower seeds while you're at it. So those were just some main basic tips for making poultry keeping even easier. I'm sure there are many that I've missed, but don't forget to check out my channel because I do have a lot of different care tip videos where I go into more detail on there. And as always, please make sure you do your own research and figure out what works best for you and your flock. Talk to other keepers, see what works for them. I'm just sharing what has worked well for me and some other keepers that I know over the years. And I wanted to share it with you to see if it would help make your life any easier. When it comes to owning animals, I feel like there's always something to learn, no matter how many years you've been in it. So don't forget to subscribe so that way as I learn more useful tips and care information, I can share it with you guys.